What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the daily live puzzle series. I'm your host, Quinn, and today we're solving a puzzle that's rated just above the 2000 level on chess.com. So let's take a look at the effects of this position. So we're going to start with a mental process that's a little bit even further removed from looking at the piece activity and the king safety and things like that, these imbalances. We're looking very abstractly, but also very concretely at what pieces are attacking and defending each other and just tabulating that to start with. So we have his rook and his queen right here having defensive effect on each other. They're connected. And the rook is possibly going to move to e8 to give a check. Our knight is defending that square, fortunately for us. Otherwise, he would have a skewer pointing directly at our queen, and that would not be very good. Our knight is also eyeing this d5 pawn, after which, if you were to capture, there would be a fork on the e7 bishop and the e3 queen. But if we were to do that, we would give up this e8 square to the skewer. Our rook is also attacking this pawn, but it doesn't really help us to have two different attackers on the pawn because there's no defenders. Our queen is defending the knight on f6, and our queen is also defending this pawn. There's an x-ray attack on this pawn if he were to ever push this f pawn forward. And our king is not really defending anything other than the queen, but that's kind of not super significant at the moment, other than maybe if he were to give a check on e8, he can take our queen and our king can capture back. His king is defending this h2 pawn here. And these pawns on the queen side are mostly left alone by both our pieces and his pieces. So that's all for that. And let's take a look at the material. So we are up a full knight already in this position. That's significant to point out. We are kind of protecting and trying to hang on to this material while we're getting attacked by his remaining forces on our king. And the pawns are also, we have 5 pawns and he has 6 pawns. So we're down a pawn for a knight. Looking at the king's safety, I would say his king is relatively safe. He has thrusted these pawns forward, so it weakens his position slightly. We can even actually take this pawn on g4 as well. That's another move to consider. So I'd give his king safety maybe about a 6, because even though he's exposed, we're not really attacking it right now with any of our pieces. Our king safety, on the other hand, I would give a 2 or a 3, because he's amassing his forces here to penetrate on the e-file and give a check to our king in a very unpleasant fashion. In terms of space, he's got a little bit more space in the center with these pawns here on f4 and d5. In terms of piece activity, I would also argue his pieces are a little bit more active. Again, they're very menacing down the e-file and along the 8th rank, potentially, and also even along the 7th rank, where he's really controlling a lot of squares here, not allowing our queen to escape. And then in terms of other factors that we could consider, I don't see anything super significant that stands out that's worth highlighting. So let's go to the candidate moves now. So the first candidate move is the move that I initially spotted in this position. Knight takes d5. And I would like to get a initial impression on this move by just calculating it a little bit. So if we were to take knight takes d5, we would hit a fork on the rook and the queen, and it would allow him to play rook e8 check. After rook e8 check, there's no move that can block the check. There's no piece that can take the piece that has just delivered the check. So we would have to go with our king to another square, like h7, g7, or f7. And in any of those cases, he could just take our queen with his rook. And let's say we move to g7 or h7, and we can just take back with the king. Then we would have a knight and a rook for a queen. So we would be down material in that case. We would actually be down 2 points. So we go from being up by 2 points to being down by 2 points. That seems like a result that we definitely don't want. But if we were to move our king to h8 after rook e8 check, the capture on h8 here would not be. Did I say h8? I meant g7. If we were to move our king to g7 and he took on h8, we don't have to take back immediately because it's not a check that he just gave us with that capture. Our knight is on d5, and we could actually take on e3 here, and we would be even material because we would have traded off a couple queens off the board. And his rook would be under attack, so he would have to move his rook again, and then we can, make a move with our knight or just push this pawn. Well, if he goes back to e8, for example, our knight would be under attack. We can just move it back to d5. So that variation doesn't look very bad. And in fact, we would get queens traded off the board. We would improve our king's safety. And being as we're up in material, that's always good to trade off. And we would also have won a pawn in that case. Another option here would be to move our king to f7. But let's finish analyzing g7 first. So another thing to highlight after this series of moves is that he doesn't have queen to e7 check because our knight is protecting that square from d5. So that looks good for us as well. Just still continue to consider this candidate move. So if he were to play rook e7, rook e8 check, what if we went king to f7 and he takes our queen on h8, then we take his queen. He doesn't have the ability to go back to e8 anymore, but he could simply maybe slide to like a8. So I don't see a huge difference between f7 and g7. That's a little bit concerning when there's two moves that look very similar. Makes me kind of second guess whether or not we actually did solve the puzzle correctly on that first move. So we'll keep that in mind, but let's analyze other potential candidate moves. So another thing that we want to consider is like, how do we get our queen to be more active? That's one of the benefits of trading off queens here, is that it would eliminate our less active queen for his more active queen. But are there ways to just organically like get our queen to be more active? We could potentially, after a move like knight takes, or somehow getting our knight out of the way, we could potentially get the queen out here to a1 with a check if he doesn't take our queen right away. So that's a motif to consider. But in this position, we don't have any moves that would get our queen activated because his rook is covering all the mobility squares of our queen. There's not much that we can do with our rook either, because just taking here doesn't really do much for us. He is potentially going to double up on the 7th rank in a way that's potentially very disastrous. So we want to avoid that. And I think taking on d5 would just be too slow because that would give him serious winning or at least drawing chances. So there's also knight takes g4, but that would also give up rook e8 check. And d5 just looks like the stronger move because we're attacking both of the heavy pieces in one turn. So if we were to play knight takes g4, maybe he can just move his queen or something like that and get out of dodge, like queen to e4, and still have the ideas of doubling on the 7th rank. So looks like knight takes d5 is the strongest first move. I don't see any other candidates. I think it's a move that we have to play in this position to maintain the tempo criticality and kind of stay up on the initiative relative to our opponent. So let's go ahead and commit to that move. So he does give the check. And now we have to play either g7 or f7. This is an important moment of decision. Another question is, are there any follow-up checks? So if we go to g7, he can hit us with queen to e5 check, skewering our king and the queen, and getting out of the attack of our knight. And that move, I think, would be disastrous because if we were to move to h7, he would have queen takes h8, and that would be a checkmate. So we don't want to do that. And if we move to f7, he can just take our queen for free with his queen or with his rook. And in both of those cases, that would be very bad for us. So moving to f7, I think, would be a little bit better here because he doesn't have a check. He doesn't have e6 because our rook is covering that square. So let's go ahead and make that move. And he takes our queen, and then we take his queen. And that's the end of the puzzle. So we won a pawn. We traded off the queens. And we managed to secure an endgame position where our king safety is no longer a concern. And we should be just winning and promoting this c-pawn. Let's take a look at the analysis to see if there's any other insights we can get out of the position. So first of all, let's take a look at what he could have done that's not immediately losing. So the computer is recommending queen to c3 instead of queen to e3. But even in that case, we're like comfortably ahead. So he does go queen e3. And what is wrong with knight takes g4, for example? Okay, so he would still play rook to e8 check. And if we were to go if we were to go queen f7, we actually talked about this earlier. He would just go queen to e7 mate. So the key difference here, in addition to forking the rook and the queen, is that on d5, our knight also protects this e7 square from his queen. And we don't get mated in one move. So that's a key distinction between the two moves as well. So these details really do matter, especially when you're solving higher rated puzzles. We went with this move for the reason of just wanting to hit a higher value fork. But either way, we were able to solve the puzzle. And I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. And I hope you'll tune back in next time and subscribe so you can see more live puzzle solves here on the channel. So I'll see you guys tomorrow.